I'm having some issues with my laptop, so I'm gonna rename this thing.
I think it's fitting.
Yeah,
What I do?
like people get mad, then it's like David, blame David. He's gonna forget I changed this. He's gonna get on the next Zoom call or Zoom meeting.
Let me just. Okay, we got feedback. Right. Left.
It's like we never did this before.
It's been a long time.
Yeah.
All right. Sue on here yet?
No, I don't see her yet.
No, I don't either.
I would just go ahead and get started and she can jump in. She said it'll only be a couple of minutes, so.
That's fine. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Monday, January 3rd City Council meeting via Zoom. Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Sure. Happy New Year, everyone. Alderman Santee, Alderman
Here.
Glab, Alderman Glab's not on yet.
It looks like he's stuck in the waiting room.
Okay. Do you want me to wait or move forward?
Move forward.
Go ahead and move forward.
Alderman McClatchy,
Here,
Alderman Harding,
Here.
Alderman Strack,
Here.
Alderman Devine,
Here.
Alderwoman Miller,
All right. Monty he's still in the waiting room?
Yeah, there's two Andrews. There's two different Andrews in the waiting room. I admitted him and it just says joining. And it just says joining. It's not letting him in.
All right,
And Sue Miller's coming in right now.
All right, thank you.
so Mayor Judd, everybody is present, correct?
Alderman Glab is the only one I'm not
Okay, thank you.
sure. I mean, but Sue just joined now, so
Thank you.
thank you, Sue. All right, let's go ahead and stand for the pledge, please.
to the flag.
To the flag of the United States of America. To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so first item on the agenda is the public comment portion. This is items that are not on the agenda this evening. So if there's anyone from the public that would like to make a public comment, this is your time. I'll go ahead and open it up. If you'd like to talk, please unmute yourself and raise your hand and I'll go ahead and call it. Phil Hofstadter, go ahead.
Yes, as a concerned citizen of McHenry.
Calling Profix computer repair.
Go ahead. I don't know what it was. Go ahead.
Mr. Wayne Jett plowing snow into the city street and getting it removed by public again. We're paying for it. We're taxpayers.
Okay. Is that all you like to? Go ahead.
I have contacted Alderman. Then this morning, you plowed the snow over the city sidewalk to your neighboring property.
Okay.
I have pictures and videos. I want something done immediately about this because you said you would never do that again last year. And this has happened again.
Last year when it happened, normally I would not respond, but since you've mentioned it, last year I said I would not do it after 2 a.m. because that what happened for a company that we hired, did it after 2 a.m., which is after the city of McHenry already went by, caused some issues, but I was out of town. And I will tell you, and Bill Hobson will go ahead and get on here and read the snow and ice control plan from 2002 and 2003. So Director Hobson.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah, my camera is not working right now, but yeah, from the snow and ice control plan that was adopted back in 2002, 2003, there's a paragraph on page 15 that specifically addresses both homeowners and business owners plowing snow into the street. I'll read that. It's not a long paragraph, so I'm going to read the whole thing. Residents and business owners are strongly discouraged from deposition of snow and ice from driveway cleaning back into the roadway once the Public Works Department has completed plowing on that particular roadway. This practice creates an unnecessary hazard for motorists and pedestrians and costs the city additional monies to send drivers back into the area to remove such deposits. Those businesses on streets in the downtown business district are permitted to deposit snow into the street. And we do that primarily because a lot of our business owners in our downtown don't have a place to put snow. And so we use large push boxes starting at 2 a.m. We'll send our crews out and they push that into large piles that we're then able to remove from the downtown area. We've done this for over 20 years and probably even dating before this formal plan was officially adopted. When we encourage business owners to plow their sidewalks into the street, there's a number of businesses that have had to take advantage of this in previous years. And I can certainly reference those if need be, but that's the paragraph directly from the 2002-03 plan that we've really focused on for the last 20 years, honestly.
Well, that piece of property that Mr. Wayne Jett has been stockpiled in the back corner from when the post office was in there. It was never pushed out in the street.
And it causes a hazard.
It can cause hazard. Nobody can see it.
Yeah, and I'm just reading what our plan and what our practice is. This is what we've done for over 30 years. It's been businesses such as Windhill has done this, the old McHenry Savings Bank, Old World Coin, Colthurst Dentist. There's any number of businesses that I could go through for years on every street, both Main Street, Green Street, and Riverside Drive, that have utilized this practice for us to be able to go through as an advantage for our downtown businesses and as well as provide parking for both employees and visitors downtown. We start that process at 2 a.m. and I think we're extremely efficient in doing so at a time when there's very little traffic. Usually all the snow is cleared out of the downtown within 2 hours. By 4 a.m. we're ready to open for the business in the morning. So that's usually how that plan works and how it's operated, and I'm pretty confident in the manner in which our guys perform that.
Well, I feel that the cost of this as taxpayers is not suitable for what's going on now. He does have room to keep his snow on his property, and it's always been that way. I can see Windhill because they don't have a parking area. But if you have substantial, his neighboring property, they keep the snow on their property. There's no reason for him to push it out there.
thank you.
Any other public comment?
I don't see any other public comment. All right, moving on to consent agenda items 5A through 5F. Is there any items that council would like to pull for separate consideration?
It's bullshit.
None, okay. Items 5A through 5F, I'm looking for a motion and a second to approve 5A through 5F. Alderman Santee,
I'll make the motion to approve consent agenda items 5A through 5F as presented.
thank you. Alderman McClatchy,
I would second that motion.
thank you. Discussion by council on these items? Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Santee,
Yes.
Alderman McClatchy,
Yes,
Alderman Glab,
Yes.
Alderman Harding,
Yes.
Alderman Strack,
Yes.
Alderman Devine,
Yes.
Alderwoman Miller,
Darn.
I don't know if she's on there or not.
she was, maybe she got like dropped off, I think.
All right, we'll go ahead and move forward. All right, Let's see. First action item is 6A. Is a discussion to approve an ordinance, a motion to approve an ordinance granting a zoning map amendment, zoning variations, and a conditional use permit for outdoor storage, open lot sales, automobile service and repair, and trailer service and repair facility at 2600 West Elm Street, Illinois State Route 120. Director Palarecki, you want to go ahead and start us off here?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. So basically, this property known as Adams Trailer was annexed in the 90s into the city of McHenry. And it was given a conditional use permit for outdoor storage, open sales lot, automobile service, repair, and trailer service. The owner of the property has expanded over the years, and this is going back like 20 years, that this was done into the business park on Adams Drive without getting the city of McHenry's additional approval through a conditional use permit. So there is a new buyer for the property, and during the sale of the property, we were asked to do a zoning verification letter where we found out that the expansion was performed without a conditional use permit. So the bank trust is petitioning the city of McHenry to change the zoning on the lot to allow the outdoor storage, open lot sales, automobile service and repair, and trailer service at the 2600 West Route 120 in the area that was expanded in previously. So basically what we're doing here is we're just cleaning this up. That business owner has operated like that, like I said, for at least 20 years. The new owners will be cleaning up the eastern property tree line, fixing fences, creating more berms for to hide the trailer outdoor storage areas. So if again, we're basically just cleaning this property up. If this goes through, I believe that the sale will go through and we'll have new owners at that property. Petitioners are on the call tonight if there's any questions, and I'll be happy to answer it as well.
Thank you, Ross. All right, I'm going ahead and asking for a motion and a second to approve 6A as presented. Alderman Santee.
I will make the motion to approve 6A as presented with the zoning map amendment, zoning variations, conditional use permit for outdoor storage, open lot sales, automotive service repair and trailer services repair facility at 2600 West Elm Street as presented.
Thank you. And Alderman Strack, second.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Open up for discussion by council. Alderman Glab, go ahead.
Yeah, this would be for Ross, probably the question. What do we have anything in our ordinances as far as fines for not following our ordinances on this and the zoning?
You know, it's very hard to figure out when it was done. I mean, we can only do it based on aerials. And, you know, we're talking 20 years ago. You know, I go back looking at the overheads from 05 and, you know, it was already done at that point. So, you know, could I find a way to levy a fine? I could. I think what's best in this position is that we get it cleaned up and taken care of. Again, they've been operating for 20 years like that. You know, I don't believe it was done maliciously. I think it was just as that business expanded, they bought property and they expanded their use, not knowing maybe that they needed to get that conditional use for those new properties.
I believe the people that own the property always did it. Weren't they the ones that started the subdivision in the first place? And I understand
it was the family. Yes.
We need to go forward. The thing is I think to some extent we don't want to be hard-nosed or anything else, but we also don't want to have a reputation in this town to everybody do what they want to do. So that's just a statement more than anything else. Not necessarily just zeroing in on this property, but just the fact that that's not the type of reputation we want out there. We expect when we create ordinances and that everybody follows it, and there should be some reprimand other than, no, let's just clean it up when there are problems that arise like this. So that's all I've got to say. Good luck, hopefully, on the new owners.
Thank you. Alderman Santee, did you have something?
No, I just wanted to express that, yeah, the ownership has been there for quite a long period of time. They've also owned and operated and leased other properties in town. I feel that understanding that, yes, they've used some of that property, after later first opening the facility, but it's a family. I spoke to one of the owners today that has been operating a very large company that's brought in a lot of dollars to our city, understanding that, yes, something that was overlooked. I'm willing to overlook this and move forward with the new owners. I would just hope that the new owners could be as well or even better than what we have there today. And knowing that the previous owners will still be around town doing some other work, it's nice to watch that family grow, and actually all the money and all the investments they've actually put into our city over the past at least 30 or 40 years that I know of. Thank you.
Thank you, Vic. Any other council members have any questions, comments? I'm going to open up for public input. Is there anyone from the public that would like to make a public comment regarding this item? If so, please unmute yourself. See none? All right, at this time, I'll go back to council, give one opportunity for last discussion. If there isn't any, we'll go ahead and do roll call. Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Santee,
Yes.
Alderman Strack,
Yes.
Alderman Devine,
Yes.
Alderwoman Miller,
Yes.
Alderman Glab,
Yes.
Alderman McClatchy,
Yes.
Alderman Harding.
Yes.
Thank you, council. Good luck to the new owners if they're on here. We appreciate looking in McHenry and Adams, the Adams family. We appreciate all you've done in the city of McHenry. So thank you very much. All right, next item on the agenda is 6B, is a motion to approve an ordinance granting a conditional use permit of the operation of a drive-through restaurant at 4104 West Elm Street, Illinois State Route 120. Director Palarecki, you want to go ahead and present this item?
Sure. So everybody was very upset when Arby's left north of town, and now they're looking at going into 4104 West Elm. So this conditional use permit is for the operation of a drive-through restaurant at 4104 West Elm. Pretty straightforward. All drive-through establishments require this type of conditional use. So I'll leave it at that. If council has any questions, the petitioner is also online too. Might I just add real quick? I did have a question earlier about the state approval. So the petitioner does have a verbal approval from the state, nothing, of course, in writing yet. There will be adding a left turn lane eastbound going into the property, as well as doing some traffic light reconfiguration timing wise for this site. So if there's any other questions, be happy to take them.
Thank you, Ross. All right, at this time, I'm looking for a motion to approve 6B as presented. Alderman McClatchy.
I would move to approve the request.
Thank you. Second. Alderman Harding.
I second that motion.
Thank you. Open it up for discussion by a city council. Alderman Santee, go ahead.
Just to confirm, Ross, on this, so it'll actually function as a four-way intersection. The light will operate for outbound and inbound customers going into Arby's?
That's correct. Dan,
Okay.
do you want to expand on that a little bit? What IDOT's been in contact with you?
Sure. My name's Dan Havler with Northwestern Engineering Consultants, the civil engineer on the project. We would have to reconfigure the intersection there. Right now, there's a striped left turn lane which goes into the driveway on the site. We would unstripe that middle of the road, more or less, add a left turn arrow to turn for eastbound traffic north into the site, and then redo the timing on the intersection. And all this, of course, would have to be approved by IDOT. And that's what we're requesting right now, that they give approval so that we can start a design to do that left turn lane into the existing driveway on the site. We will be just reusing the existing driveway on the site, so the intersection geometrics will remain the same.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions by council? Alderman Glad?
Yeah, it's not a question, it's just a comment, and that's the fact that the only reservations I have of this is the impact to Crystal Lake Road. You know, right now, with what the school had done and everything else, there's a tremendous amount of traffic at certain times of the morning and in the afternoon. And then with the approval of the apartments on Mill Street, you know, that's adding this, I don't think will be a significant impact to Crystal Lake Road, but every little bit helps as far as causing more traffic. So I think as we go forward with other projects and whatnot going down Crystal Lake Road, that we're keeping in mind the fact that we're every move that we make, that we are adding an extra impact there. Just remember, we're going to be talking about future capital improvements and everything else. And let's face it, the city of McHenry doesn't have money to expand Crystal Lake Road, adding extra lanes and whatnot in there. So when we're doing our planning, I would hope that we make sure that we're taking that into mind. And I would hope this passes, because my wife, or not my wife, but my daughter will just give me all kinds of hell if we don't bring RVs in.
We're back. Yeah, back.
Thank you, Andy. Any other council members have any questions, comments? See none. I'm open up for public input. Is there anyone from the public that'd like to make a public comment regarding 6B? If so, please unmute yourself. See none. Once again, council, any questions, comments? If not, we'll go ahead and do roll call. Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman McClatchy,
Yes.
Alderman Harding,
Yes.
Alderwoman Miller,
Yes.
Alderman Devine,
Yes.
Alderman Strack,
Yes.
Alderman Santee,
Yes.
Alderman Glad.
Yes.
Thank you, council. Next item on the agenda is discussion item. Is a discussion regarding the implementation of a community investment plan for general fund capital, asset maintenance and replacement, and identification of alternate general fund revenue sources.
Mayor Jett,
What's
I'm
the-
sorry to interrupt, sir. Should we be on C or did that get pulled?
No, C got pulled. Sorry, I
Okay.
should have said that.
I
6C
just wanted to confirm to
I
make sure.
apologize.
Thank you. Yep. Thank you.
Sorry. 6C has been pulled from the agenda this evening, so I apologize.
I forgot to remind you when you started the meeting, so.
I did.
No, I
Oh,
should
you did. All right.
you told me 10 minutes before the meeting started. I should have remembered that. But yeah, so discussion item, Derek, you want to go ahead and get us started?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and a happy new year to everybody. It's good to see everybody again, even though it's on Zoom. Hopefully we'll be live again here soon. So I'll kind of lay the groundwork for this agenda item. It's just a discussion. It's to introduce council to some new process and strategic planning information, and provide you with some additional information to consider for future discussion and action. But Troy is actually going to do a majority of the presentation, and I'll tell you why in a second. So just to give the members of the public and the council that are on here that may not have been as familiar with the way we've done things previously in terms of capital improvements. Prior to my coming to the city in 2012, the city did capital planning through the budget process, and it wasn't necessarily long-term strategic the way it was done. And that's fine. That's what worked for the administration and the city council at the time. But one of the things that we were able to put together once I came here, and I'm not saying it was my doing, but all the directors at the time, was a 5-year capital improvement program basically for all projects over $10,000 that were capital oriented. So, streets, for example, was in that. The purchase of vehicles was in that. Any facility improvements, water, sewer projects, et cetera. And that's the form or the document that we've been using for the last 8 or 9 years. to base our capital improvements off of. As some city council members know, and I've said it multiple times in the past as part of that process, that's basically a Christmas list of all the projects, both maintenance and replacement and any new projects, and condensed into a 5-year period. It's really kind of unrealistic to look at that as a budgetary document that we can use for implementation, because it was more than $50 million. It's always been over $50 million for the last 10 years. And then we would pick projects out of there that were the highest priority as part of the budget process. And so a couple of years ago, actually, I saw in a publication where a neighboring community, and I've since identified others that have done it, have moved more towards what they call a community investment plan. And what that is a more long-term strategic planning tool to identify, first of all, and what we'll be talking about tonight, those capital asset maintenance and replacement projects. So what I mean by that is those existing assets that the city already has that we can program and strategically plan for in our budget process for replacement, if needed, if and when needed. And again, that's vehicles, facilities, et cetera, et cetera. It's similar to, if council remembers, just a few months ago, you had a discussion about the water and sewer fund and implemented some new direction in terms of how we would deal with water and sewer maintenance and replacement projects. So just think of this as kind of the next step of that, and as it relates to the general fund. And if you recall, or just as a point of information, the general fund is responsible for funding the operations and capital maintenance and replacement needs of all departments outside of water, sewer, and the recreation center. And so again, we identified this as a new document, or a new potential document, a couple of years ago. We actually met with that municipality at the time. And actually, Troy stepped up. It's got to be an engineering thing. Troy Strange, our public works director, stepped up and expressed interest in putting this document together. So I want to give Troy some creds. He's really worked hard over the last couple of years to meet with all department directors, really dive into the research that he's going to go into here in a second, and putting this more strategic document together. And again, circling back to the purpose of tonight's meeting, it's to introduce this new strategic planning tool to council, along with identifying some potential ideas that council may want to take a look at in terms of funding sources for these sorts of projects into the future. Again, no actions required tonight. It's just to introduce it to you and get some initial input, and then we'll take the ball and run with it through the budgeting process, or come back to council for some additional discussion if needed, if and when needed in the future. So with that, I'll turn it over to Troy. And Mati, you want to give Troy access to his to the screen so he can pick it up from here.
Sorry, Troy, you should be good to go now.
All right, thank you. All right, oh, hold on, I gotta share my screen first. Otherwise it doesn't grab it. All right. All right, you got me?
Yep.
All right,
Yep.
well, thank you, Mayor and City Council, for your time this evening. Thank you, Derek, for the opportunity to put this presentation together, and thank you to my fellow department directors who have been patient with my digging for data and information, because it was kind of burdensome with everyone's time. So as Derek mentioned, this is a sort of follow on to what we just did with the water sewer fund. And it was born out of, in addition to Derek discovering these new types of planning documents, community investment plans. It also came out of discussion at the 2019 strategic planning sessions, where it was recommended that we start looking at a long-term projection of our capital costs. So what is community investment planning? And it's an effort in matching our capital maintenance and replacement needs to our resources. It's a little bit different from capital improvements in that what you saw in the past capital improvement programs, you didn't just see maintenance and replacement projects. You saw what I've we have come to refer to as capital expansion projects, facilities expansions, addition of new assets, building out of facilities, building out of roadways, building out of infrastructure. But if we are to match our resources to our needs, the fundamental thing that we need to do to start is just figure out what it takes to care for the assets that we currently possess. So we are looking at the capital improvements fund as primarily, to begin with, to be utilized for care and maintenance and replacement of assets that we already possess. So what is the capital improvements fund? So as you all know, the capital improvements fund is general funded. It's a general funded account that basically absorbs or receives or is assigned the revenue excesses after general fund operating costs and minimum fund balances that are set by ordinance are met. So per our ordinances, we are required to maintain 120-day revenue balance or fund balance to cover general fund operating costs, to cover any temporary or catastrophic shortfalls. This was something that was heavily discussed as COVID set in and we didn't know what the effects were going to be. It's those sorts of catastrophic things that we can't plan that fund balance is for. So after our regular general fund operating costs are covered, after these fund balances are held, if there is a revenue excess, that remaining funding is put into the capital improvements fund and assigned for capital projects. So the fund itself has been around for a while. And if we were to look at where we are going with this fund and how it's been utilized, how we've been doing as far as capital maintenance and replacement, we had to take a look at our history of expenditures. So it makes a little more sense, this slide, with the context of looking at Appendix A. So what we did is we basically put together a spreadsheet of our historical expenditures and categorize them. And the total spend on an annual basis averaged out to about $1.4 million, which seems like a lot and is actually a decent number. But when you start peeling away the layers, it's a little more nuanced than that. So in the past, our streets resurfacing, much of our streets resurfacing was funded out of this capital improvements fund. We also did quite a bit of these expansion projects that I was referring to earlier, whether it's expansion of facilities, acquisition of properties, building out of roadways, channelization of roadways, signalization of roadways. And what we were trying to boil this number down to is what was the number what number do we arrive at when we focus on what is our historical expenditure for maintenance and replacement of existing assets? And that number is in the bottom right-hand corner of the slide. It came out to about $700,000. So when you start with the 1.4 million, but peel away some of these other things that are not necessarily maintenance and replacement, which we're focusing on, the number effectively is cut in half. So now that we know what our historical expenditure is, we started building out a future projection of what our costs are going to be to maintain and replace the assets that we have. We did it for 20 years. It was a very similar process to what was done on the water sewer funded side of things. We took a look at literally every single asset. We came up with a reasonable surface life for that asset, a replacement cost, and then annualized that cost. And then we summarized or totaled all of these annualized costs into categories and an overall total to figure out what is this number that we need to replace and maintain what we currently have. We talked with the water sewer fund about the concept of equity, right? When we are replacing and maintaining assets, we're basically pumping the equity back into our system that we're losing. And that's essentially what this number is. The totals include about $634,000 of vehicle and equipment replacement, facilities maintenance of about just shy of $200,000 a year, parks, land improvement, asset maintenance, asset replacement and maintenance of about $300,000 a year. And then infrastructure costs vary a little bit because it really kind of depends on what sort of programs we want to run. They can vary anywhere from $300,000 a year on the low end to about 1.2 million on the high end. And all these projections are summarized in Appendix B. There's an overall total projection, and then there are categorized projections, which brought us to these individual category numbers. So if we take a look at each category, we can give you a little bit of clarification as far as just the philosophy behind what we're looking at doing for each category. So vehicles and equipment, you can see the totals of vehicles and equipment that the city has. And we built these cost projections based upon what we believe are very, very reasonable life cycles. So you can see them here. We're talking about 5 years for a squad car, which if Chief Burke wanted to chime in or felt like it, I think he would agree that that's probably on the longer end for a squad car. 12 years for light vehicles, 15 years for plow trucks, 20 years for a piece of heavy equipment. That all the vehicle and equipment stuff comes out to about 525. And then there's another 120 per year, or 515. And then there's about another 120 per year in light equipment, which is basically, your weapons, your cages, your lights, laptops in squad cars, all this sort of equipment that we have to give to our police to equip them to do their job in the field. That's sort of a subcategory of vehicle and equipment, but that is how we arrived at the 634 per year for vehicles and equipment. And it's important. If any of you have any questions about these assumptions, it is important that there is a consensus about our assumptions as far as service life, because the assumptions about service life and costs are what ultimately lead us to what we need to agree upon as our future asset maintenance and replacement need. And I'd like to think that these assumptions as far as service lives are on the long end of normal. We're not talking about trying to get shiny new equipment. We're talking about reasonably and responsibly replacing what we have before it's completely spent. Facilities. So we have several city facilities that are not general funded. All the water sewer funded facilities, the water plants, wastewater plant, they're all an enterprise fund. Recreation center is its own fund. So there's really three primary facilities that the city has that are general funded: City Hall, the Public Works Building, and then the Parks Garage off of Green Street. City Hall costs come out to about $95,000 a year. And it's interesting, when we looked at these projections, we wanted to see if we were in the right ballpark in terms of sort of our unit cost for what it takes to maintain a similar building. So we took the future cost projection and divided by the square footage of the building and came up with $2.38 per square foot per year, basically maintenance and replacement costs for City Hall. So that cost per square foot per year, Exelon Energy, which is essentially ComEd, they have some guidelines as far as facilities maintenance. Their number is $215. So our number we independently arrived at is a fairly reasonable representative number for what it takes to maintain these facilities. And so as far as facilities go, we're talking about roofs, we're talking about replacement of parking lots, generators, windows, all the heating and air and all the mechanical systems, all the, think of it as a big house, all the things that you have to replace in your house every decade or two. Those are the kind of things that we need to do in a large facility, but this is a 40,000 square foot facility. Parks land improvements, again, same philosophy. The improvements we looked at, we sat down with the Parks Department with Bill and Pat Gorniak and looked at their projection. Was we have a very robust acreage of parks and facilities, and the typical stuff that wears out and needs to be replaced on a regular interval are your parking lots, your playground equipment, your courts, your gazebos, your buildings, your fences. This is all stuff that doesn't last forever. It all has a cost to replace and keep it into service. We try to do as much as we can in-house as far as maintenance, but when it gets these bigger capital items, some things we need to have a capital expenditure to replace. So that's how we arrived at that $300,000 per year. That's also in Appendix B. And then infrastructure costs. This is the one that varies a little bit. The very, very fundamental things that we looked at on the low end were, resurfacing of multi-use paths. We really have not had to resurface multi-use paths yet, but we have 3 or 4 of them now. Some of the ones we have are mid-90s construction, so they're approaching that same 20-25 years that we talk about for resurfacing for roads. Annual crack seal. This is a very good preventative maintenance treatment that we believe running a regular about $100,000 a year program for our mileage is reasonable. Major culvert rehab and replacement. So we have several multiple barrel box culverts, multiple barrel corrugated steel culverts, just large culverts that do not qualify as bridges and therefore don't get bridge funding, but have capital maintenance costs that need to be performed on them as well. Bridge rehabilitation and replacement, not all of it is federal funded, so there is a portion that we need to cover ourselves. replacement of streetlights, replacement of signal equipment, all this routine stuff that, you know, I think for the most part, we all drive down our streets and don't really understand that it's a depreciating item with a finite service life. Those are all things that have their costs for replacement. And then if we are on the high end of these costs, and this is more just food for thought. I don't know if anyone's really expecting to immediately implement programs like this, but I think all of you would agree that for the concrete curb and sidewalk we have in town, if we were to get 100 years out of such concrete curb and sidewalk, that's success. That's a very long service life. If we were to replace just 1% of our curb and sidewalk every year, which is 1% is, you know, 1/100th of 100 years, is a $300,000 a year program for each. So that's the kind of equity that we're losing in terms of our concrete infrastructure out there. And it's a cost that's going to come due at some point. The challenge is really we're still in the first generation of the first service life of an entire generation of American construction that we've yet to see the end of that service life. But these replacement costs are what we're going to be looking at in the future. You know, all of you, I'm sure, get calls about deteriorated curbs in people's neighborhoods, in front of people's driveways, sidewalk. You know, all of you as elected officials get these calls all the time. You know, all these panels, all these sections of sidewalk, some of them we can replace ourselves, some of them we can grind, some of them we can trim, but on the whole, they all have a limited service life that is going to be due at some point. And then another program to consider, most of our developments from the 50s and 60s and onward have precast concrete storm sewer, and it's a pretty robust design. When we televise that stuff, it all still looks pretty solid, but some of these other neighborhoods we have, either the older ones in town, neighborhoods we've annexed in the past, a lot of them have corrugated steel that's 50, 60 years plus old. Most of it, when we televise it, is pretty rotten. When we have these roads in our road resurfacing program, we have to do a lot of spot repairs, even some replacement of sections. But on the whole, this small portion, it's only about 5% of our storm sewer, but on the whole, this portion of our storm sewer infrastructure is really already at the end of its service life. It's about 5% of our overall storm sewer. And we want to just apply the same logic as we did to the lining of the clay sanitary sewers, trying just to take care of it all over, say, a 20-year period. It's about a $200,000 a year program. So again, those are a couple of those optional general funded infrastructure programs that would take you from that baseline 300 all the way to a $1.2 million price tag. So I know that was a lot to absorb. So that was how we took a look at our future projection of capital maintenance and replacement costs. That's the philosophy, the determination of costs, service lives, and just projecting it out into the future. The next thing we needed to look at was, okay, so we know what our costs are going to be. We know our costs are going to be anywhere from this 1.4 to $2.3 million that we need to pay to replace and maintain our assets. And the only fund balance that right now we have that pays for such replacement is our general fund capital improvements fund. So what's happening in this fund? So we took a look at our 10-year historical sort of escalation in our general fund operating revenues versus operating expenses. That's shown in Appendix C. We've got a data table here, which has 10 years of actuals, followed by 10 years of projection. And a couple numbers that we zeroed in on were the average percentage annual revenue increase relative to the average percentage operating increase. And what you'll see on the first page of Appendix C, the box at the far upper right-hand corner, general fund operating expenses have been outpacing general fund operating revenues in terms of growth by about 1% per year. So if you start where we're at, and you'll notice in the notes that we actually, we took a snapshot a little bit further back that wasn't affected by COVID, because we really don't know how, there's a lot of anomalies with our revenues and expenditures that happened with COVID. So we took that percentage, those percentage increases, and started kind of just before COVID and projected out 10 years into the future. And what we found is if we follow those same percentage increases, which are our history. They are our 10-year history of what these funds are doing. Operating expenses would exceed operating revenues in about 2025. So if this happens, we're either going to need to reduce operating costs, or we're going to need to look at new revenue sources. And that's just to cover fund costs. That's our operating costs. That's not even to cover these capital costs that are also going to be necessary. So if we don't address this at some point, and we do have some time, so we're talking about 5 years out, and it's not a perfect projection, but that's what the data is pointing to. We're either going to need to reduce costs, increase revenues, or possibly even reduce services. And then here's the chart with the projection, taking us out to 2031, 2032. So what makes up the general fund? The primary revenue sources, and they're detailed out very well in the agenda supplement that Derek put together. But the big ones are your property taxes, your sales taxes, your income taxes, telecommunications tax. That's actually a minor one, but it is one that we do have some influence over. Charges for services, video gaming. These make up a lot of the bulk of what contributes to the fund. So property taxes. Historically, for the last 10 years, the revenues have been about $4.6 million per year. I know we just passed a levy with the first increase in about 10 years. At the time when this was prepped, it was a little bit before that that decision was made. But prior to that, for 10 years, it was held flat. And that alone, doing that instead of increasing the levy with PTEL, which is the property tax extension law limit, we missed out on about $6.4 million in revenue. If these losses or this flat levy were continued for another 10 years, those losses would really start to compound themselves, where you'd be talking about $20 million in revenue losses. And control over property taxes is definitely a commendable thing, given the current climate. But when you look at where the overall fund is trending, there are certain things that we'll have to give. Sales tax. So as a rule, the state of Illinois collects 6.25% sales tax, 1% of which is local municipal sales taxes. And then in addition to that, there's also 1% municipal sales tax for all food and drug purchases. So historically, that number's been about $8 million a year for us from that baseline sales tax. And then, as you all know, the city has implemented 2 sales tax increases. In 2012, we implemented a 0.5%. And each sales tax increase raises about, each 0.25% raises about $925,000 per year. So in 12, we did a 0.5%. In 19, we did a 0.25%. The max you can go up to is a full % of home rule addition. So that, if we were to consider that would add another $925,000 a year to our general fund revenues. And it's important to note these sales tax increases that occurred in 2012 and 2019. At the time, they gave us some cushion in terms of our operating budget. But if you look at them now, these increases have become very, very necessary. If these increases were not implemented, the balance between operating revenues and operating expenditures, the margin would be smaller, if not in the red, depending upon the year. Income taxes, it's a big portion of our overall general fund revenues, but it's not one we can really influence. The distributions are population based, and as you can see, from 10 to 20, our population remained relatively stable. So this is one we really can't influence too much. We've seen residential growth and development recently, so we could start to see marginal increases in this, but nothing significant, nothing that would fundamentally change our budget. Telecommunications tax, these revenues are about $270 a year. We doubled it in 2019. We can increase it again, but the overall collections, for whatever reason, have been on a downward trend, which is something that Carolyn has seen and enlightened us on. Charges for services, a lot of this has to do with our rate structure, our permit fees. That's also been a fairly consistent number, and we have been looking at our rates and our ordinances, but for the time being, the number has been fairly stable. And then another source of revenue, video gaming. The act was passed in 2009, so it's fairly new to the city and to our budget. The revenues have increased every year. Last year's budgeted revenue was $550,000. And then obviously the revenues are controlled by, they're a function of the number of gaming machines, which is connected to our liquor licensing. And this is another one. It's no longer a negligible portion of our revenues. You know, a lot of these increases that have come in the last 10 years, they've all become necessary just to maintain the stability of the fund. So if we can acknowledge or agree that the trend lines are pointing us in a direction in which operating revenues may not be able to meet operating expenses, and we still have these capital needs, at some point we're going to have to look at some sort of revenue source. And staff have really zeroed in on 3 sources: the next 0.25% sales tax, continuing to look at increasing the levy in accordance with PTEL with our property taxes, and then utility taxes, which are taxes on usage per unit of energy. Specifically with NICOR and ComEd. These are referred to as in Derek's agenda supplement, second to last page, and you can see the totals we could potentially realize if something like this were implemented. If there were one of these sources that staff would recommend considering, you know, sooner rather than later, if we were to consider something like this as a part of the budgeting process, we would recommend taking a hard look at the utility taxes. So overall, final conclusions, and again, thank you for your time and patience. I know that was a lot to rattle through, because the goal of this is to start to meet these capital needs. Some of these revenue increases in the past have gone, you know, they've kind of gone towards this, covering this creep between the operating expenses and operating revenues. The recommendation coming out of this study would be to actually, any additional revenue increase, if it's significant, put it directly into a capital fund so that it doesn't have to sort of fight with general fund operating expenses. The capital funding can be addressed and be assigned and protected for such capital purposes. And then it'll also force us as staff, force us as an organization to reconcile our operating costs with operating revenues. And then another thing which was touched on earlier, paying for new assets, paying for asset expansion, paying for facilities expansions, paying for things like, as Alderman Glad referred to earlier, widening Crystal Lake Road, or our participation in Route 31. These are all big sort of expansion projects that add new assets to our inventory to be cared for. And they do 2 things. They peel away from the resources to take care of what we have, and they add new assets that we have to maintain. So if we're going to be looking in the future at big ticket expansions, infrastructure expansions, facility expansions, we are recommending that these types of projects are funded with their own new revenue sources. And specifically, we'd probably be looking at some sort of bonding and possibly non-refunded bonding in the future. If council deems a expansion project that necessary, then the funding itself should also be necessary and separate from the pool of resources to care for what we already have. So a few final points. One last appendix, which wasn't really covered, but should give you a little bit of context as far as where we stand relative to our peers. We have a list of all these sources of revenue and what other municipal agencies are doing with them. So we have the total municipal levy for several comparable agencies, and then we also have a park district levy, because that's another important thing to recognize. We deliver a very good, very robust scope of services with our parks department, whereas other communities they levy as a percentage of EAV, a separate levy as a separate taxing body. And when you combine those numbers and you look at our municipal competitors, the resources that they have with their property taxes and their levies, ours are significantly lower. It's a discernible difference. We have where we are at with sales tax relative to others, and who has gone all the way to that 1% cap, and then also where others are at with utility taxes. So I am here to answer any questions, as are Derek and Carolyn and any of the other department directors who contributed to the compiling the assets. And as Derek said, we're not looking for a firm motion tonight, but we do ask that you consider what's being presented and possibly consider one of these new revenue sources, because I do believe they're going to become necessary at some point.
Hey, Troy, can you touch on the roads? I mean, if I was looking at this for the first time, I would ask a question about local streets, but obviously we've moved on. Some council members know. Can you talk about our street program and how that's funded and what we're looking at?
Correct. Yeah. So in the past, funding for streets was kind of part of the feast and famine of the capital budgeting process. Most of those projects, the resurfacing projects, were paid for out of the general fund when there was general funding available. And our motor fuel tax funds went to material purchases. All of our winter salt went towards that. A lot of our matches for federal aid projects went towards that. A lot of engineering costs and projects went towards that. And we've really stripped down the usage of the MFT fund. And we've made some tough decisions. We've passed on some different projects. We've passed on some engineering projects that maybe were, a little bit intriguing, but weren't sort of serving the fundamental need of resurfacing streets, which for those of you who've been on the council for a long time know it's been a real problem. So when the state increased the MFT distributions, we were able to realize all of that. Salt is now paid for out of our operating costs. So as a baseline, we have $1.2 million of motor fuel tax to pay for road resurfacing. We have the local motor fuel sales tax, which is taxed independently within our municipal boundaries at gas stations. That contributes about $325,000 a year. And then through our staff attrition process of general fund employees at the Public Works Department, specifically the street division, we created another $525,000 per year of capital funding. So that all those three sources total $2 million, because way back when we calculated that if we're trying to hit a 25-year service life on our roads, which is about the longest we can do, we need to spend $2 million a year. So by knuckling down and really dedicating these resources and making tough decisions about how to allocate them, we've created that $2 million a year, which we can fund in perpetuity. This year, our program is actually 4. That has to do largely because we have sort of this baseline $2 million a year, but the state of Illinois also put out these Rebuild Illinois bond funds, which were an extra distribution. So those are all going toward resurfacing as well. So it's our goal was to hit $2 million, and we did do that, and that's how we did it.
Thanks, Troy.
Thank you, Troy. Does any council members have any questions for Troy?
Troy, could you take down your screen so my screen stops freezing? Thank you.
Perfect. All right, anyone have any questions for Troy? Now that I can see everyone. Alderman Glab, go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things I want to mention is probably for Moorfield more than anything else, is as far as sales tax dollars go. When we're looking at the sales tax dollars, more and more internet sales have become prevalent. Are we sure that we're getting our share of the sales tax dollars? And also, does that count as far as our city sales tax? Does that get collected as well?
Yeah, actually, that's a good question, Alderman Glab. Carolyn could probably answer it better than me. I know from my personal experience, because I buy a lot of stuff online, I started paying more attention to the things I buy online. And there is a tax that shows up on that now that's supposed to come back to the municipality that it's purchased from. But Carolyn, maybe you can address it better than I can.
Yeah, and it's starting in 2021, the businesses were required to collect, and it's not all businesses. I believe there's a size on the business on if they have to collect. And it gets even more detailed on that. And if you have a location within the state and brick and mortar within the state. So it is a little bit complicated on whether or not they do have to collect it. But we are seeing a much higher, I would say a higher amount coming in. So that would show a sign that we are receiving those from online.
But we don't know whether or not we're getting the city sales tax online as well. Or are they even required to collect the cities?
They are required to collect it, like I said, from certain businesses. It depends on the size and if they have brick and mortar in the state. There's a lot of rules on if they have to collect it on the online business. But yeah, I mean, the ones that are required, it does look like we are receiving it.
Maybe we ought to every now and then check some of these businesses. Certain people like to spend money anyway. Maybe we order some things online and see if sales tax comes up on it or not, the city's portion. Another thing I wanted to bring up was income tax. Now, according to what we're showing, distribution of income tax comes back to the city by population, correct?
Correct.
Not by incomes within the
No,
city.
it's all on your population.
But we're basically talking that there's not much of a significant increase. But I think we should be looking at a little bit more of an increase, because you got to remember that state's figuring on minimum wage going up a couple dollars more within the next couple of years. That's going to add additional income tax that the state's going to take and collect. With this COVID, as things wind down, hopefully more and more people will be going back to work, so they'll be paying more income tax. And if you take a look at it, granted, our population increase was only 143. However, that's a plus considering the state's losing how many thousands of people a year. So our cut should be a larger cut every year as we go on. If we're increasing in population and the state is decreasing, plus, like I said, the income or the minimum wage is going up significantly over the next couple of years. So that's all going to be taken in. And I know it probably be a little bit more difficult to try to analyze it at this time where we would be as far as additional income there. But as we get that additional income, we probably should be looking at trying again to keep our property tax flat wherever possible. And that's where I will be fighting to keep that property tax as flat as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Any others? Alderman Santee, did you have, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll try to be real quick. I appreciate this presentation. It gets your mind going and it starts thinking down different avenues, and he brings up some great ideas. And then I think some items that maybe, not that we skipped, but just to reiterate a couple things. First, considering into those 3 bullet points, I'm open to considering, but I will follow in Andy Glab's position in regards to the property tax. That's a tough one, and I think it's shown in our record over the last 10 to 12 years. But that being said, if we make some budget avenue changes, adjustments, could we then, and I think this is something, and correct me if I'm wrong, Troy, that we've done, that you've done in Public Works, is that we've directed money into certain pots in regards to the streets and rebuilding streets. We could, as a council, on an annual basis, take a fee from utility tax, a new utility tax, and can we go into Derek pitches us on going into this that we really need the money here, and here's why, A, B, and C. We can do that, right? And we can do that on an annual basis?
Yes, we could we could put it in the capital improvements fund, or you could set up a completely different fund and earmark it specific for whatever council decides.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
You could do it you could even, as far as even doing it by ordinance. So let's say, for example, council wanted to adopt we're just talking hypotheticals, right? Some utility tax. by ordinance, they could adopt that and direct it to a certain fund or certain projects within that fund, whatever, it could be done by ordinance.
Okay, and in my field, I don't know if the city or if we see anything locally on an internet tax, but I've seen it in other communities where they've placed a franchise fee to businesses that are taking, high-speed internet into their businesses. I don't know if they're doing that on residential locations, but I have seen it with people I've worked with over the past 3 or 4 years. So just something I've seen in other communities, in a couple other counties, that other villages our size, bigger size communities have implemented. I just want to stress, and I'm not, this is not pushing the envelope in another way, but it could be barking up the wrong tree, but I just want to make sure that we are, as a council, as a staff, we're trying to still reinvest in our business locations that are empty today. That can we get somebody in there? I know it's unique with what COVID's done over the last 2 years, and here we are on Zoom again. We don't know, we don't know how many business positions or how many offices are going to be needed down the line. But I just want to make sure that we can aggressively do our best to find people to get into those, to get into those buildings and, aggressively work with them. And you know what? That means a tax, possibly rebate to start them off, something to influence them to know that they can grow their business and hopefully they're around for at least 20 years. So I just want to make sure that that's still, that's also in the minds of, of the staff, and we can, continue down that, make sure that avenue is still open and we're looking at it. And the other question I have is that came up real early with Derek and Troy. You mentioned other communities. What communities are doing this type of funding?
That's well, the last appendix shows 8 communities: Algonquin, Cary, Crystal Lake, Huntley, Lake in the Hills, Mundelein, Woodstock, and where they're at with specifically their utility taxes, and then also where they're at with their percentage of sales tax, and then and also just their overall municipal levy, and if there is a park district, what the park district levy is.
And it's state law, they're under the same constraints that we are in regards to sales tax, correct? They could go to a certain percentage and that's it.
Yeah, the only one who's not home rule in this list is Cary. Their sales tax rules are a little bit different, but in general, you can go to the Illinois Department of Revenue website, and you can look up any community in the state and find what their home rule sales tax is.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions or comments. I'd like to hear from other council members.
Thank you. Alderman McClatchy, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Have we discussed raising the impact fees? It seems like we're talking about everything making the city even better, but we keep approving these apartments and different developments. That's an impact on the city. So I'm just wondering if that's been talked about.
I can grab it. We don't have impact fees that go directly to the city. We have building permitting fees, which you will be seeing before you here within the next month or two, a increase in those. But as far as like impact fees for roads or anything like that, we don't have those. We have impact fees for schools, park. I take that back. The parks does have an impact fee, so that's one way of funding the parks. It's a developer donation fee. But as far as any money going to any other funding, we don't have it.
So for I guess the concept of these impact fees are they are to pay for the expansion that it takes to accommodate that additional population. So with like roads and bridges, for example, a developer typically has to build out the road and storm sewer infrastructure for their development to accommodate that development. On the water sewer funded side of things, they also have to install sanitary sewer and water main But the thing that those impact or capital development fees, we call them on water sewer side of things, go towards specifically is our plant capacities. That's what most of those fees that are in there are for. So they're going to build the water main, they're going to build the sanitary sewer. But if we have to add a 5th water plant, if we have to add a 5th water tower, if we have to add a cell to our wastewater plant, that's what those water sewer capital development fees pay for. And then, like I said, on the general fund side, I think roads, bridges, storm sewers, it tends to kind of take care of itself because they have to build that infrastructure to build their development.
The developer is also required to improve the downstream if there's an issue with capacity on any of those systems downstream from the development. But I know Alderman McClatchy, a lot of communities do have road impact fees, things of that nature for developers. That's what I was referring to. We don't have anything in our books like that.
Maybe it's something we should look into. I'm done. Thank you.
Alderman Glab, go ahead.
Yeah, as far as impact fees, just the fact that we as a community have to show a reasoning why we charge what we charge for impact fees. We are not able to, just because we're home rule, create our own impact fees by whatever we want to charge. We have to show that when they come in, that they are impacting the city to whatever degree that we want to take and charge those fees, because they have in the past, I haven't heard anything recently, but many years ago, some developers would challenge in court some of the municipalities because they felt they were too high. And so when developer donation fees were set, it was set because of the actual impacts, and the city could show that those developments were impacting the city to that degree. It wasn't just off the top of our heads that we came up with different figures. And just because we're looking at more revenue doesn't mean we could just charge more impact fees. Plus the fact we got to remember that those impact fees are a one-time shot. Once they're charged, that's it. And I think one thing that we're missing that nobody's discussed tonight, and that's the fact that how do we take and try to hold back property taxes? You need the funding, and I understand that. So maybe we need to look at a different type of source of funding. And I know I brought this up many years ago and it never went anywhere, but maybe we need to look at because we're home rule, I believe we could create a transfer tax. Let's face it, you got somebody that's retired, and do we want to keep charging more and more on property taxes to where eventually they either have to leave or they lose their house because of the fact that the Social Security maybe doesn't cover what they, their expenses or whatever, where somebody is in our town living, we do a flat tax, but then we charge them for a transfer tax only when it's sold. Only when it's sold. So in other words, until they're ready to leave that establishment, they're home. They're not being charged as badly as they're for property taxes while they're living there. But then at the end, when we do the transfer tax, that's where we recoup the money. And there's always, look around town, you see real estate signs all over the place as far as for sale. Look at the commercial strips, and you see for lease and you see for sale signs all over the place. Maybe that's something we ought to talk about also as far as the size of the signs, because when you have one sign here or one sign there, but we wind up with large amounts of large signs all through the city. But maybe that's a revenue source that we should look into, is as far as the transfer tax, to try to alleviate going up on our property taxes on a year-to-year basis.
Thank you. Alderwoman Miller.
So maybe I'm too new to government, but I would like to see a list of additional sources of revenue that other communities have or use outside of taxing real estate more. I don't know that list. I don't know how comprehensive that list is or isn't. I could probably do my own research, but Derek, you've been in government business a long time. I don't know what that list looks like. So I would like to see a list of additional or other sources of revenue and what that looks like, what opportunities we have. I'd like to see that list before we make more decisions. I love the idea of transitioning to this type of a plan, where when we create new revenue, it goes to this expenditure process. Because we've already spent everything we already earn on what we have to spend it on by ordinance. So I love this kind of budget process. But I think I need to know what other sources of revenue can we create, or can we think out of the box and create them? To continue to tax real estate will put people out of our community. And to Andy's information seeking on impact fees, developers make decisions to go to a community based on the cost of building. So they will make a decision to not come to McHenry if our impact fees are too high. And they'll say no, because that's the check they have to write to put a shovel in the ground. And it costs them money, which of course they recoup, we hope, from the cost of their sale, or in the return of their sale. But if their sale price is too high, no one buys. And that's why we've seen some of our developers not be successful in McHenry and McHenry County, because our developmental fees have been too high. And when they've left the county, they've been very successful. So we have to be very careful as we discuss and determine impact and developmental fees, because if it's too high, we lose. And I don't know that I'm willing to lose again moving forward when we're building such an attractive city.
Lisa, go ahead.
Yeah, in response to that, irregardless of whether the developers feel our impact fee is too high, like I said, I've always felt that we should be fair on our impact fees. And I again explained earlier why, but also if we don't charge what is truly the impacts to the city on development, that means the rest of us are paying for it. And that's the whole idea of impact fees, so that we aren't paying for it. So what we need is we just need to make sure that we don't want to gouge, but we do want impact fees that do take and charge developments for what it does impact the city. No more. We don't want to collect extra revenue because of it, but we want to make sure that our residents aren't paying for what they're impacting us on. That's the whole idea of that process with impact fees in the first place. One other comment I wanted to make, so I don't forget, and that's the fact that I think if we decide on this as a tool, our administrator Morefield said, it is a working tool, and in order for it to be a working tool, we should set a certain meeting every year that we review nothing but this big this program, so that we can update it on a year-to-year basis, and it also gives the council a good awareness on a year-to-year where we're at. Thank you.
Yeah, just a couple points, Wayne, if I can, before I forget about them.
Yeah, go ahead.
To Alderwoman Miller's point, just know that we're always looking for additional sources or resources of funding, whether it's for the general fund or water, sewer, or any of the operations or capital assets that we have, especially since we've gone through this process over the last 12 or 18 months, whether that be grant funding or anything that can help, do projects here or help operations and the municipality. So I'm not really responding just to you, Sue, as much as I am just letting the whole council and public know that what we will consistently look for additional or alternate sources of revenue to be able to reduce the costs on the residents here in the community. That's why we put through the utility tax in here as part of the discussion, because it's one that we don't have, I don't think have considered while we've kind of talked about it in past budgeting processes. It's something new for us that other municipalities use. And it's a substantial revenue source. We can talk about, 73%, I'm just using round numbers, of all of our general fund revenues come from either property taxes, sales tax, or income tax. And the rest of it comes from other sources, be that video gaming or fines and fees or, grants or whatever else. And so whatever we can use to fill in that 27% or reduce the 73%, we'll continue to look at. But it should be something substantial, right? Implementing something that may get us $50,000 a year is $50,000 a year. I understand that, but what's the administrative costs that go along with that? An example was, the city stickers a few years ago. We had the city sticker program, and I don't know what our revenues were on it, but we identified that it was, not really worth the effort going into city stickers anymore because of the administrative headaches and costs that went along with it. Maybe that's a bad example, but it's one that I thought of offhand. And then to the second point, actually, I forgot what the second point was. I was just of what Andy just said. No, never mind. It'll come back around. Go ahead.
You just pulled a Wayne.
I did. I know, totally. Yeah. Wow. My old age.
Any other council members have any questions, comments?
Oh, I know what it was now.
Go ahead, Derek.
So to Andy's point about doing this on an annual basis. Yeah, we totally agree. This is not a document like the CIP was done in the past. It's something that we will actually monitor throughout the year, and that we will update, whether be it because we've completed, certain capital maintenance and replacement projects, or we're just moving on to the next round of capital maintenance and replacement projects. We'll make sure that this is a document that's, I'll call it a living, breathing document that's updated annually, and that council will have an opportunity to review and provide input on as part of the budget process, just like we have done the capital improvement plan in previous years. So, again, I'll say it here that it's something that we'll make sure that we bring the council as part of that budgeting process, which actually starts now for FY 22-23, so that council can review and provide some input on. I knew I'd remember it. Thanks.
Thank you, Derek. Any other questions, comments by council? Mr. Ack, did you have something?
Yeah, thank you, Mary. I think this is certainly coming in and only seeing one previous budget and having some conversations with directors of the departments about how things are budgeted and how things are these capital improvements and capital expenditures and repair costs. And Troy and I had some lengthy conversations when I first came in about exactly that road fund, exactly what we're talking about here tonight. I think it's just super important that we move to this kind of a plan so that we can budget this way, because I think it's super important for it to go that direction.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Thank you all for your time, and Troy, thank you for putting that together. I appreciate it. All right, moving on to other items on the agenda, and there is no other staff reports this evening. I have nothing for the mayor's report. City council comments. Is there any city council members? Alderman Glad?
Yeah, I've had a couple of constituents bring this up. As far as there isn't supposed to be any snowmobiling out on city property throughout the city, and especially in our parks. We have some people that do skiing, what do they call it? Cross-country skiing through some of our parks and everything. And it can be very dangerous having snowmobilers out there, where they're going to find they're moving at a good clip and they may not expect to see people out there. It's very difficult, I know, to enforce our ordinances on this because I've seen this problem for 25 years. However, what I would like that maybe in our parks, if nothing else, to start, that we try to get signage put in there and possibly in the city newsletter that we highlight the fact right up at the top as far as the fact that snowmobilers are not allowed in the city on city property. Private property is fine, but not on city property. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other city council comments? See none. All right, looking for a motion and a second to adjourn. Alderman McClatchy.
I would move to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you. Alderman Glad for a second.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman McClatchy,
Yes.
Alderman Glad,
Yes.
Alderman Santee,
Yes.
Alderman Stratt,
Yes.
Alderman Devine,
Yes.
Alderwoman Miller,
Yes.
Alderman Harding.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
You too.